friends. Welcome to the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I'm East Forest. I hope you're making it through these wild, wild weeks. It has been some really intense ones as the waves of change continue to wash through us. This week, I have an episode with Oleg Stavistky. I hope I'm saying that right. I do ask him right at the beginning, so... Oh, and as per usual, I need to say that we recorded this several weeks, actually a couple more than a month back. Thank you, Oleg, for your patience. So you got to know the timeline of when we record these so you can get a little bit the reference of what we're talking about, although we keep it pretty tight, the conversation, as to concepts of music, science, the brain, and wellness. But he's part of a company called Endel, which is making, as they call it, personalized sound environments to help us focus, relax, sleep. I mean, essentially, they're working with a similar conundrum that I work with in my own process of East Forest, which is like information overload and how do we navigate our way through modern life and try to do it more authentically. And this is one of their answers for that through technology, which is always, an interesting discussion about whether we can use technology positively to navigate this threading the needle into our future, or whether we need less technology, more nature, or a bit of both, most likely. But I love exploring folks who are trying to figure out ways to bridge that gap. So I think you'll enjoy hearing more about this technology that they're working on. I wanted to let you know that this Friday, June 19th, which is also Juneteenth, I believe they're calling it. It's a holiday to mark the end of slavery in the U.S. That's my understanding of it. But I, last week, on June 2nd, I went to a Vigil for Black Lives in Boise, Idaho, which was just what it sounds like. And about 5,000 people showed up. We were all wearing masks. It was kind of an incredible showing of solidarity. And Jessie Levin, one of the organizers, along with Whitney Mestel, organized this event. She read the names of 86 black names that were killed by police violence. And it's not a complete list of names that have all been killed, but it's a list, a terrible long list. And she just read them out, and then as a crowd, we repeated the name, and then there was a pause, and we continued forth. And this whole process, this candlelight vigil on the state capitol in Boise, Idaho, lasted about 30 minutes. And I recorded the reading of the names. And at the end of it, Jesse asked us all, take action, do something. And I was thinking about what I could do, and I thought I would try supporting this movement with music. So I got into the studio and started making music and trying to support the reading of those names. And within 24 hours, I had a track. And I didn't quite know what to do with it. So I reached out to Taylor Dupree for mastering, and he immediately donated his time. And he was very busy, but he did it like the next morning. And I reached out to Maria Gauthier, who's been doing a lot of artwork for me lately. And same thing, she did it that day, made some artwork for it. And everyone just donated their time. And I wanted to donate the proceeds of the track to good causes. And so Jesse and Whitney had started a new organization called Inclusive Idaho. So I was like, I'd love to donate the proceeds of this track from this, if we can get it out, to that organization and Campaign Zero. So I'm going to spare you all the ups and downs with there's pushback from some folks who are like, look, you shouldn't be putting out work. You're a white voice, and we want to be uplifting black voices right now. And I'm like, well, I hear that. And from my place of privilege, I do hear that. And I'm also trying to help by uplifting a black voice, Jesse, who's reading the name of black people who were killed. So it felt good to me, but it's like I can either enter into the conversation and in solidarity, or the option was to not, to sit it out and not release this track and share it with people. And one of the main reasons I wanted to release it is because when I was making the music, and at the end of it, it's a long piece, and I can be kind of hard to listen to from the emotional content, but at the end, when they say George Floyd's name and the whole crowd screams it back 3 times, it always brought tears to my eyes. And it's about the power of music to amplify the emotional content, like it does on the Ram Dass record. Like Ram Dass is saying really amazing things, just what he's saying. You put the music behind it, and all of a sudden now it's amplifying and supporting what he's saying, and you connect to it in a deeper way. It's the same thing with this. Like now the emotional response in my body is stronger, and I can't not turn that off. And so it helps me, a white male, connect to the movement even more on a gut level. And just for that, if it helps connect those dots for a few people out there, that's a good thing. That's helpful. That helps us continue the conversation and learning and discussing and feeling it, really feeling it. So I was struggling with the nuance of putting this out, and I did reach out to Jesse and Whitney, and thankfully we were able to finally talk on the phone. And this made me feel a lot better because they're very supportive, and we're releasing it in partnership. And that means a lot to me. So thank you, Jesse and Whitney, and thank you everyone who came to that vigil, and thank you to everyone who's been a part of this movement and these larger movements of change. So this track is called Vigil for Black Lives Lost, and it comes out on all streaming platforms, Spotify and Apple and so forth, including my website, on Friday, June 19th. And all proceeds go to Inclusive Idaho and also to Campaign Zero. So I just want to give you a heads up. And you're going to hear a bit of it at the end. I don't put the whole track in this podcast. One, because it's before the release. And two, I want you to hear the whole thing. And it's really too long. And I want you to hear the good high fidelity mastering that Taylor did. So head over to the streaming platforms to experience the full track. And that by doing that, by listening to it, on those platforms, you're helping create some revenue that can support these organizations. So that's what's going on there. Otherwise, I've just been down in Boulder, Utah, working on that. We had a couple friends come down to visit, which is always nice, and getting out on the land. I've got a few other things I've been continuing to work on, and I'm looking forward to telling you about that soon. One other piece of business is the retreat that's currently scheduled here in Boulder for October 1st through 4th is still on. I'm just trying to figure out like where this COVID movement is going. And as we all know, it's not going away. My gut says it's just it might increase in the fall. And so we haven't decided whether to postpone or cancel or move forward. And we're going to make that decision in July. So just so you guys know out there. It's so hard, man. It's for all of us. There's so much going on, and I know you guys are just like me trying to ride the waves, and I'm sure there are waves. And it's okay to feel up sometimes and feel down sometimes. Just remember that everything passes, even the good times. So it's just about staying present, getting back on the horse, and keep riding. Thanks for giving this podcast a review, especially thanks for subscribing. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts make a big difference. You can do it while I'm talking. Just scroll down to the main page all the way to the bottom. Boom. 5 stars. Write a written review if you haven't already. I love reading those, and they're great support. Encourage other people to say yes to pressing play and us getting other great guests on this podcast. So on that note, let's dive into this. Let's learn more about Endel. Thank you so much for dropping in, Oleg. And tell me how to pronounce your last name so I get it right, too.
Oh, man. It's Stavitsky.
Stavistsky.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the derivation of that? What's your family history?
It's a Polish / Ukrainian Jewish mix.
Gotcha. I speak a little bit of Russian from my days in having a Russian girlfriend when I was in graduate school in Moscow, and I took it in high school. And so I speak like a Russian cab driver. Or, well, if I was an American who was a cab driver in Russia, that's what I would speak like. So
you've been to Moscow?
Да, yeah.
Oh, man.
Школа.
Wow.
Махати. Yeah.
Махати?
Знаете Махат?
Oh, да.
Да, yeah. Stanislavski. So I was an actor in a past life, and I got my master's from the Moscow Art Theater School.
No way.
It's a long story, but basically the Mahat did a joint program with the Institute for Advanced Theater Training, which is at Harvard University and the American Repertory Theater. So they kind of joined forces. And so my degree is the longest name you've ever heard of. It is the American Repertory Theater Institute for Advanced Theater Training at Harvard University and the Moscow Art Theater School. So that was the educational place of graduate school for me in my young 20s. But I did spend some time in Moscow, which was lovely. And it was back in 2000 when it was a very different place than I would imagine it is today. And I had a Russian girlfriend. I had a great life. And the dollar went pretty far. And, you know, it was a different time. So
Crazy.
Anyway, so you are working on an interesting project. And I reached out because I have a lot of interest with my East Forest project in how sound affects our consciousness and how we can use music as a tool. And especially I'm interested in sort of bridging the divide between the analog and the digital, between nature and technology. So I think the best place to first start, if you could just give a little bit of background about what you're up to, and then we can get into this.
Sure. I mean, you know, the way I like to describe Endel is, you know, this is a technology that was built to help you focus, relax, and sleep. And that's it. The way we do that is we procedurally generate a sound environment in real time, on the spot, based on a number of inputs, like the time of day, the weather, your heart rate, your movement. So we plug all of these inputs into the algorithm, and the algorithm generates the soundscape in real time, on the spot, personalized to you. And then, you know, we continue doing that so that, you know, we can react in real time to the changes in those inputs, like the weather changes, we react to that and things like that.
Yes. Are you trying to put me out of business with robots? Is this like an AI that is going to make music and make human beings obsolete who make music?
No. The short answer to that is no. And if you noticed, and I mean, in all of the interviews I do, and you know, all of the articles, we never use the word music because Endel is not music. It's we call it functional soundscapes, and it's definitely like it was not, and it never was, and never will be our goal to compete in any way with musicians. What we're trying to do is we're trying to actually grab a couple pockets of listening time when people are generally not listening to music. Like this is when they work, and this is when they go to sleep. Or if they do listen to music during those hours, it's not to enjoy the music itself. It's because they're almost trying to self-medicate. Because we live in this crazy, overwhelming, informationally overwhelming world, and people are trying to control their environment. And the easiest way to control your environment is to control your sound. So that's why people are literally trying to self-medicate with music, with all these focus and study playlists out there. Yeah, that's what we were saying is, hey, instead of just playing some music that some editor in Spotify thinks will help you focus, why don't we, engineer something that is specifically designed to help you focus, relax, and sleep?
Are you familiar with Mikey Siegel, who I had on my podcast, or the Consciousness Hacking Group out of San Francisco? He's particularly interested in how technology can bring us essentially closer to others and ourselves. And he and I worked on a few little things where exploring music and doing emotional response receptors and heart rate and breathing, and then using this in exercises to turn it into music as a way of doing various experiments and having fun with it. But you're kind of talking about using sound as a tool in a dynamic way that's responsive to our biorhythms and biofeedback. So let me ask you this on a technical level. How would you be getting the information about what's going on with our physiology to transmit that into, say, your phone or a computer?
Well, we're actually, because we're not a lab environment technology, we're a B2C technology. We're trying to work with what we have. So basically, we're getting your heart rate through some of the wearables that we currently support. That's like Apple Watch, Samsung Gear, things like that. And, we're getting your location from your phone. So basically, when you go through the onboarding process in the app, we're just like, hey, please allow us access to your location. Yeah, basically, I think we're doing a good job at being transparent why we need this. So from your location, we understand where you are, when the sun rises and sets, where you are, the amount of natural light you're exposed to, what the weather is there. So you don't need to have any lab equipment.
So it's just like wearables, or you're creating new wearables as well, you're saying?
No. We're not in the hardware business at all. I think
You're not at
we're
all. Okay, so ones that exist.
Yeah, the ones that exist.
So there's other companies I've heard are trying to make like dynamic soundscapes for public spaces or workspaces, or I hear yours is maybe a bit more for like the private space in a way. It's for the individual, and it's for mental health, emotional health, well-being. Tell me about the applications you see for this and what might be in the way of that. But, I've always advocated that sound is like asking a fish what water is for us, because it's so ever present in our lives that we really don't understand the role it actually plays. I had a great podcast with this guy, Julian Treasure, about this. And it's all about this, essentially, like all the ways that we're unconscious, unaware of its role to our consciousness and our physiology and our well-being. What have you guys been coming up with? How do you see this coming into our lives?
It's interesting that, we've just published a manifesto of, Endel's, it's Endel's manifesto. It's basically, it talks about what we're building and why, the underlying philosophy of it. And the way I see Endel, I see it as a tech-aided bodily function, really. We're in a world where we have these earbuds, like all of these wireless headphones. And there's this trend in technology that is called sound AR, where we can augment our reality with sound. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to build this additional bodily function, a sound bodily function, that will automatically adapt to whatever is happening in your life. And it's not going to be intrusive. It's not going to require any conscious effort from you. It's like you just go about your day, you order coffee, you go to work, you talk to people, but it's always there. It's always on. Sometimes you can barely hear this. Sometimes it just helps you, it sort of blankets you from, the outside distractions. That's how I'm thinking about it, really, that it's this sound that's always there, and that adapts to whatever is happening in your life.
Wow. So the idea is like if you're wearing your AirPods or whatever, earbud things, that it would just be going throughout the day. Is this something you envision, like shifting to a speaker in your room and running at night as well?
Exactly. And, we're seeing these ecosystems that are currently, popping up here and there, like the Apple ecosystem, the Google ecosystem. And the good news is that all the big guys, Apple, Google, and I think Amazon have recently, it's crazy. I didn't even know it was coming, but they've created this consortium, and they're working on a unified API for the smart home. So basically, your Alexa could finally talk to your HomePod and could finally talk to your Samsung Smart TV, for example, which is amazing for us. And that's exactly how we're thinking. You come back home after a long day, and we know you just had 10 meetings. We know that you've been stuck in traffic. We know that your heart rate is like above your resting average. So we re-engineered the whole environment based on the context of your day. And that actually goes beyond sound as well. Like, we've started with sound because it's the most powerful environmental parameter, but it's not the only environmental parameter. There's also light and temperature as well. And we see us going in those directions as well, like a couple years from now.
So, like, what kind of sounds are you creating? Does it involve any field recordings? Are they like textural, or is it actual tones, or are they rhythmic? Or does it go across, does it change? Because if you're going to have this going 24 hours a day, you need quite a bit of variety also for people's personal taste of what they respond to. Is there any kind of litmus test to be like, this is working better than the other? Or does it require the user to say, I like this or I don't like it?
This is an ongoing debate. in the team, because we keep talking like, should we try and, basically serve people's tastes? And my current answer is no. My current answer to that, like, if you want to listen to music, you can listen to whatever music you want. And this is when you actually consciously listening to something. If you want to listen to Endel, Endel is not music. It's a functional soundscape. And it's very, very, very neutral. And if you listen to the app, after a while, you don't even notice that it's there. And that's precisely the point. It's like, how Brian Eno said about ambient music, that it's as interesting as it is ignorable. And that's
why I hate it when people call my music ambient, because I say, well, by the technical definition of Eno, you're saying it doesn't matter. It's like in the background. But yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing. Like we're creating these soundscapes. We're working. It's a mix. There's some natural sound. There's no field recordings yet, although again we keep debating if we should include them or not. But primarily we're dealing with like tones and scales and things like that.
So what kind of science are you bringing to the fore when in regards to which tones you're using? Are they in just intonation? Are they in equal temperament? Are you getting down the rabbit holes of the hippies thinking that, 432 hertz and this one's the solfeggio and it unlocks your pineal gland? There's some wonderful actual, some of it's math, right? And it makes a lot of sense. Like a fifth is a fifth. One's more in tune. That makes sense to me. Telling me that in an infinite spectrum of tonality, one tone is supposedly better than another, or this is going to unlock my DNA or whatever term someone's using, does not make as much sense to me. But tunings do, temperaments do. How are you paying attention to that kind of thing?
I really miss my sound engineer and my composer voice in this conversation, because like this is he's responsible for that. But in general, yes, we're using the pentatonic scale. This is a scale that is known to be very easily processed by the brain, and it's found in
the 12-note scale, like is on the piano. You're essentially saying like those intervals as we see on a piano.
Yeah. So basically, yes. We're using this, and this scale is found in the majority of traditional music, like throughout all nations, really, and so we're using that, and this scale is known to be very easily processed by the brain, as I mentioned. Also, what we're doing is there's a beat in the focus mode, and that beat is synchronized with your average resting heart rate (BPM). There are some studies that show if you listen to a beat that is synchronized with your average resting heart rate (BPM), it sort of brings you back into the zone. Things like that. So that's why, for example, the beat that you hear in the app, if you have a wearable, it's actually this is your average resting heart rate (BPM).
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if you like listen to a beat that's slightly slower than your average resting, it can help your heart go a little bit slower.
It can.
It'd be interesting. So it sounds like you're trying to back some research up with the choices you're making. Or are they more artistic?
Again, it's a very good question. Again, we keep debating that. Initially, we were very scientific. We basically, what we've done after the initial idea came to mind, we were like, okay, let's see what's out there. So we basically, read through a bunch of white papers that spoke about how sound influences your cognitive state. We picked what made sense for us, because there's a lot of contradicting research out there as well. There's a lot of science out there. That's the good news. So basically, we picked the white papers that made sense for us. But then, as you mentioned, obviously, because we were facing some artistic challenges as well, because some people are that have been using Endel for months, they're like, yeah, but it's playing the same thing. I don't really notice the difference between like the shifts. So we're trying to kind of make it more varied, and in that sense, we need to make some artistic choices as well. But we're always want to stay grounded in science, basically.
Sure. So is this something that ultimately exists as an app, or how will this be rolled out? or is it being rolled out now? Because it seems like you're still working on stuff.
No, it's okay. First and foremost, Endel is a technology, of course. Yeah, it's a
Mm-hmm.
technology that it's a platform-independent technology, and we're building a bunch of consumer-facing products that are currently live. There is an iOS app, there's an Android app, there's an Alexa skill, there's a macOS app, there's an Apple Watch app. So there's a bunch of ways for you to go and try Endel right now, with more to come.
Great.
What's going to happen? What's going to happen throughout this year is we're going to go live on a number of other platforms as well. Like there's going to be a smart TV app as well, things like that. But what's going to happen after that is we're going to unify all of this ecosystem with what I call input sharing. So that would allow us to share input data across the ecosystem. So like imagine you would launch Endel on your Alexa that has no way of knowing your heart rate, right? But your Apple Watch does. But because we're sharing the data throughout the ecosystem, you would launch Endel on your Alexa, and the soundscape that you hear there will be informed by the heart rate that we're getting from your Apple Watch. Things like that. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we're working on a bunch of integrations with big name car manufacturers, for example, and consumer electronics companies. So Endel is going to be integrated into some of the products later this year and next year.
Are they doing that integration into their products because people from a user experience are liking it, or is it because there's some science now that you're finding about how it's actually reducing stress?
I think it's both, actually. All of the partners that have approached us, and some of them are like really big name partners. Like I unfortunately, I'm under NDA, so I can't really give names. But for example, let's say big car companies. Some of the big car companies came to us. They've learned about us through some of those deals that we've done, like the Warner Music deal and like the Smart Water partnership that we've had, the Apple supporting the app and, us being featured on the App Store. They learned about us. So I think it's first and foremost, it's the brand and what we call the culturally relevant partnerships that we've done. But then, of course, they come to us because they're actively looking for a technology like ours. So they were looking for a tech like ours, and then suddenly they read about something like, there's this algorithm that just signed the deal with Warner Music.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. that was a nonsense deal, really. Seriously, it was a sub product, really. Like we clicked the button, the algorithm generated those soundscapes. We were like, yeah, you want it, there you go. Like this, it's not what we do here. Like we're not in the business of creating music albums for big labels.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that seems like it's really not like the core of what you guys are doing, but about this idea of AI generated music and what it could be and what it couldn't be. And I mean, I love that kind of stuff, but maybe not the purview of this discussion. Well, what else could you guys get for input in the future as a way of getting even more creative? You have heart rate. What else can you gather? You know where we go and what our schedules are and what the weather is. So you're kind of doing like an inference there of like how that might affect our day. What else can you pull from to make a dynamic soundscape?
Your movement, like your cadence. Like how fast are you going? Are you walking? Are you running? Are you driving? Are you flying? Are you commuting? Things like that. This is something we're actively working on. Another thing we're looking really, really into is your sleep data, and specifically your real-time sleep data. Because finally, we're at a point where there is a bunch of companies that track the phases of your sleep in real time. So we can understand if you're in the deep sleep phase, in the REM phase right now. We can see if you fell asleep or not. We can help you.
Have you seen the one that records you when you snore?
Yeah,
have you seen that?
There's a bunch of them. Yeah, there's a
and then
bunch
you can
of them.
play it back for you later. It's like, there it is. I told you, you snore, and it recorded you. It doesn't record the other person on the other side of the bed. I don't know how that works, but
there's for sleep, for example, there's sound masking, right? So if we have access to the microphone, which is a tricky topic, especially in your bedroom. So it's like we keep we keep trying to think about like how do we approach this.
Yeah, just say please again, please. Can we? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be
But
more
at the
than
same
that.
time,
Yeah.
you know, like there's a car alarm that goes off on the street. We can mask that. Like we can bring in the white noise and make it so loud that you're not going to wake up from, the car alarm. So things like that.
Interesting. Well, it's an interesting vision that you guys have for it to be this ever-present soundscape. And as you said, today, many people are already sort of self-medicating in their own ways, partially with their own picking of music, partially by having playlists that come on, partially by putting on a radio station, whether it's Spotify or whatnot. So it's already something people value in their lives, and you're sort of bringing in sort of the substrate of it, which is just the sounds themselves, which you're not defining as music. Even though it sounds like some of it is musical, it has beats and it has intervals, it has tones that are in harmony. So it is a form of music. You're just saying it's not, I don't know, it is music, really, if you think about it by definition. So you guys are in the music biz. But that being said, do you look at things like in training the brain through like binaural beats or different, different forms of sound meditation, sound healing techniques? Do you look at this?
We do, and like binaural beats is this, it's this dubious topic. Some people think it's really dangerous. Some people think it's nonsense. So yeah, like
dangerous, like because you're driving or something, or what?
Yeah, like it's just because we don't really know how they affect your cognitive state. There's a lot of contradicting research out there as well about that. So yeah, we're not using binaural beats right now, and we don't plan to.
Anything else like that you're looking at from a more scientific background of like these are techniques we can use with sound that we know? I mean, for instance, even a kick drum or a beat in a certain pulse, as you're already using, that can entrain the brain. And it probably is a vestige of how we would hear a drum or something, or probably actually like our mother's heartbeat, when we're in the womb. It's like one of the first sounds we hear. And so it's just like it's in our bones there, so to speak, of a form of relaxation. And maybe that's why house music is so big. It's like when you hear that dung, 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 it's a reminiscence of their own beat of life. Not to get too poetic about it, but there is studies to show that that can entrain the brain. The way a shaman can use a rattle, and that's all they're using, right? And after a while, it does start to do something to your brain waves to synchronize them or calm them down. I play around with these things in my music. They are strictly creative the way that I play around with them, but I know there's some information out there. So I was just wondering, like, because your goal is to definitely lower someone's stress response. And so there probably is a lot of research on there. What sounds do what? I mean, have you guys discovered like particular tones or sounds or techniques that do that more than others?
It's interesting, like most of the research that we're reading is about, like it's interesting. Like when you read all of these white papers and they talk about, well, energetic music, and they just play Queen, or like calming, relaxing music, and they just play Mozart. And that's what the scientists are doing. So they're not really going, one level deeper, where they're talking about like specific frequencies and scales. Like this is really, what they're doing, what the scientists out there are primarily doing. They have people listening to certain genres, and then they just, measure your biometric response to that, really. So we want to do a couple of our own researches like this year. We're partnering with a couple of laboratories here in Berlin on measuring the specific frequencies, specific scales, specific tones, the effect of those on our cognitive state. But what's also interesting in some things that we have found is, depending on if you're, for example, an introvert or an extrovert, you react differently on the same types of music. So it's something that we want to incorporate as well. Also, your chronotype. If you're, a morning person or an evening person, that affects your circadian rhythms, and that also, affects how you respond. So things like that. This is what we're looking to work with, and we're working with right now.
Well, it is a big challenge for you guys because taste is it is a big part of this, and there is a large spectrum of taste. I mean, somehow there's going to have to be a variety. I doubt there's a universal approach that you could take that would work for everyone as far as what tones, what rhythms, what sounds. There might be a core value there, but you'd have to have a variety to meet people where they're at. Some people think, for them, the saccharine song is emotional and quality for them, whereas for another, it doesn't do it for them. They need more depth. So that seems like a unique challenge that you're facing. But I think it's a cool subject, and I just wanted to hear more about it and hear from you directly. And I'm always looking for like the frontiers of where technology is meeting sound to make our lives better in music. And we're kind of each doing that in our own ways. Mine is just more from the artistic approach of creating music. I drop it inside technological experiences sometimes of different forms, whether that's shamanic or pure tech, like we were talking about consciousness hacking group and the experiments we do. I've done things with wearables too at concerts where I've worn like a Muse headset that reads brainwaves. I think it's 3 different variables it reads, and then we take that information and it's affecting the visuals, based on my own concentration or relaxation as I perform. And I've always wanted to do stuff find a wearable that the audience could wear and their own biofeedback is somehow affecting the music. And perhaps the visuals are giving showing like a meter of what that effect is in a sense, but that's one of my ultimate goals for sure.
Yeah, we're thinking a lot about that as well. Yeah, how we basically, so that you are in a way an instrument. And that brings us into this territory of, again, what Brian Eno was saying is that in what essentially Philip Glass and Steve Reich were and still are doing, where they write music as a system. They create a system, and that system basically plays itself, and there is a certain number of parameters that affect that system, but then the system can just go on forever. This is what Brian Eno was doing and is doing, and what all the minimalists in the 70s were trying to do. I'm very fascinated with that approach. And in that sense, you as a human being, you're not just an input data point. You're basically, you're affecting the output. And I think this is fascinating, like your current state, the environment around you, all of these for us is data that affects the system and that affects the ultimate outcome and the ultimate soundscape. And I find that so fascinating. I think it's just a new approach to really, if you want to, you can create music like this. We're just using sound, basically to help you go through the day. But I think, if we're going back to that notion of, AI sort of getting, sort of replacing musicians, I think this is nonsense, really. I think, and what people need to understand is behind every AI, there is a composer. There's an actual human being. People need to understand
Currently,
that. Not just an engineer, but a composer working with that engineer. And I think people need to understand that. And I think if we embrace that as a new musical instrument, there's a lot of fascinating stuff that come out of that. And I think a lot of musicians are already embracing that. Like the partnership, I don't know, have you heard about the partnership that we've had with a bunch of artists like Tori Mbois and Press Off and Washed Out, those kind of artists. Basically,
what are you doing?
They've recorded an EP, like traditional songs, but they went into a studio with our sound engineer and the composer, he's an established neoclassical composer himself. He just released a piano single on Deutsche
Who is that?
Grammophon.
Who is that?
His name is Dmitry Yevgrafov. Yeah, he has like 5 albums out on Fat Cat Records. So yeah, he's an established neoclassical composer. So he went into the studio with them and he sort of explained the framework to them. He said, like, look, in order for the science to work, you need to, for example, stay within the pentatonic scale, right? So they've recorded their songs within that framework, and then those songs were released as an EP. But we took the stems from those songs and fed them into the algorithm, and we've, basically, so if you go to play.endel.io, you will actually hear the endless adaptive perpetual versions of those songs. So so there are ways for us to collaborate, for the technology to collaborate with artists. And I find this fascinating.
That sounds fun. Yeah, you're just missing the East Forest stuff. It's like you got to dive deep into the shamanic heart space. And I love that idea. I've played with some video game type companies of creating stuff that's like this. It's like in stems, it's dynamic, different things come in and out based on different parameters, and it can go on for all sorts of different amounts of time. And that's a pretty fun way to write music. And I could even see that being a way that musicians create music, where we write music that way, and maybe that, like, even Spotify introduces this as a form of like dynamic interactive music where, like you said, the stuff you're wearing on you, it's like, hey, it's a new East Forest song, but it's like, it's as long as it ends up you wanting it to be, and it could play all day, based on, I think that stuff is super cool. So yeah, I look forward to hearing what those artists came up with. There's some good ones you just mentioned. So good on you guys for picking some good artists.
Thank you. And also, like, considering everything that's happening now, I don't know if you saw that on the internet. Like, we're right now giving Endel is a subscription-based app, but we're just giving the app for free for people to use right now. Like, considering everything that's happening right now. So basically, if you just go to code.endel.io and use the code "Stay Chill," just one word, all capitals. You just
stay chill.
Yeah, you just activate a 1 month subscription, and like no credit cards, no commitments, no nothing. It's just really, we want people, like, we understand that people are stressed right now. So yeah, if you want to spread that word out there,
what's the website again? Code.endel.io.
Yeah.
.io.
Yeah,
okay.
I can email you some assets.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll try and get this out in a timely manner. Yeah, we're recording this in mid-March, and as everyone knows, it's a very dynamic situation with COVID-19, coronavirus. You're in Berlin, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what's the situation there as far as the dynamic of the social order and emotions on the ground?
It's weird. There's a lot of panic on the internet. But when you go out, like, you don't feel that at all. People just like going about their day. It's quiet. It's like no. Like, there's people on the streets all the time.
Okay.
And it's springtime, and people are like, yay, finally spring. So you see people like having beers on the street, like having coffee. It's just, the schools are closed, and I'm staying at home with my kids now. Like, the schools are closed, the bars are closed, the restaurants are closed. But other than that, it's like business as usual. So I'm like, Germany is approaching that with a very cold hat, I would say.
Yeah, well, it's a little different here. I'm in Boise, Idaho at the moment, and maybe I feel like there's different locations or different places of, I don't know how it's reached the social consciousness yet, but it certainly seems to be exposing some social holes in our society about the people who are underserved and how they're underserved by governments, especially in America, and our healthcare system, and all sorts of problems with that we have here. And but more than anything, I'm not really sure what I think how I feel about it, but it feels to be asking for a kind of pause, or an invitation for a kind of pause, and an invitation for asking, in a sense, how we're in service to ourselves and in service to our community and the world around us, as opposed to just being in our hamster wheel of our routines. And so perhaps people can take you up on this offer and see if Endel is something that drops them more into themselves and drops them more into a state of being able to think more clearly and act from that space and react from that space.
That's exactly what we're trying to do. Basically, that's what I'm saying in that manifesto. I'm saying things like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I meditate. Like I am a big believer in the mindfulness meditation practice. But it's just, I think we need something else here. I think a lot of people are unable to meditate, or like it's just not for them. And people need technology to basically help them evolve as species. And that's what we're trying to do. We're like, this technology that is not there to entertain you. It's there to basically bring you back into the moment, bring you back into the zone, help you be more mindful without you having to meditate.
It's so crazy. It's like we could take a walk in nature, and in a lot of ways we're trying to create tools for people who either won't do that or can't do that, and we're so inside the machine and the gears of technology that's like, all right, well, now we have to hack the thing we're in to help us to get out in a way, because we're never going to get out. So it's like that's the state we find ourselves in, and it's poetic in a lot of ways.
Yes, but I'm a big believer. Like Berlin is a very green city. Like there's a lot of parks, there's a lot of lakes here. Like you can just bike to a lake that is like maybe, I don't know, like 15 minutes away from here. So it's very green. So I'm a big believer in the marriage of technology and nature and mindfulness practices. Like I don't think those things contradicting each other. It's just obviously there's a huge disbalance right now, but I think there is a way for everything in our lives. There's a place.
I love Berlin. Berlin's a great place, great city. I've played there a couple times, and I'm half German, so it has a soft spot in my heart anyway. Yeah.
Do you speak German as well?
Nope. just the Poruski, but nein Deutsch. Well, thank you, Oleg. Thank you so much for giving us some time and letting us know a bit about your world and in this turbulent time as well. I appreciate you sharing with us this yet one more road that hopefully leads to Rome. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Oleg, for giving us your time. This track you're hearing in the background is a Vigil for Black Lives Lost. It comes out on June 19th, 2020 on all streaming platforms. I'm going to give it some space. You can hear this is just the end of it. Please listen to the full track on those streaming platforms, as all proceeds will be donated to Inclusive Idaho and Campaign Zero. Keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.